Thank you so much for joining us for our 6th annual Women in Law Leadership Lecture. My name is Jody Haley. I am the Assistant Dean of Career Development here at Roger Williams University School of Law. I'm honored to serve as the chair of the steering committee for the Will Lecture series. By way of background, the series was created after our First Women Initiative in 2019, which recognized the first women to be admitted to the practice of law in Rhode Island. We wanted to continue this important narrative into today to ensure that we are keeping the issues of gender and law front and center. I'd like to recognize and thank our sponsors for their support, the law firms of Adler, Pollack & Sheehan and Hinckley Allen, and individual support from First Women Honoree Arlene Violet, First Women Honoree Louise Durfee, and Diana Ducharme. Their generous donations not only allow us to host the lecture, but they also support a stipend program for law students pursuing law and women's issues. I'm going to give you a brief overview of tonight's program. We will have a Q&A session after our hybrid fireside chat. And after the Q&A, we will announce the winners of the How Has Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Inspired Me contest. This was an essay and artwork contest for kindergarten through 12th grade students in Rhode Island, and we are thrilled to have our winners here tonight. So thank you for joining us. I will now turn the presentation over to the Dean of our law school, Gregory Bowman, who will introduce tonight's speakers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jody, for the introduction. We're so pleased to see you at this year's Will Lecture, which is the 6th anniversary of this prestigious lecture, which is now a well-established part of our law school's tradition. And as we begin, I'd like to read our land and labor acknowledgement that we read at this law school before all of our major events. So as we begin our program this afternoon, I want to take this moment to reflect on the lands on which we reside. We are coming here from many places, and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of indigenous and native peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with native peoples across the Americas and across the globe. Roger Williams University School of Law is located in Bristol, Rhode Island. So we acknowledge and we honor the Narragansett and Pokanoket people, as well as Somes, the original name of the land on which our campus resides. We also acknowledge that this country would not exist if not for the free, enslaved labor of Black people. And we recognize that the town of Bristol and the very land on which our campus resides have benefited significantly from the trade of enslaved people from Africa. The economy of New England, of Rhode Island, and more specifically of Bristol, was built from wealth generated through the triangle trade in human lives. During this time of ongoing national reckoning with our history of slavery and the disparate treatment of Black people, we honor the legacy of the African diaspora and the Black lives, knowledge, and skills stolen due to violence and white supremacy. As we gather here today, the movement for justice and liberation is continuing to build in our country. Yet many are still being met with violence and even being killed, while other people in our country actively work to stand in the way of progress. As upholders of justice, our hope is to become agents of change for members of our society who have been met with violence, physical, mental, emotional, through our privilege. And as upholders of justice, we believe that our students, who soon will be practitioners of law, can be and already are agents of change as well. It is my privilege, as we start the program, to introduce our speakers, my faculty colleague, Professor Emily Sack, and our speaker today, Attorney Rochelle Garza. Professor Emily Sack joined the Roger Williams University School of Law faculty in 2001. She teaches in the areas of criminal law, domestic violence law, juvenile justice, and reproductive justice. She is a nationally recognized expert on domestic violence and reform of the court system. She is co-author of one of the leading domestic violence casebooks and has published several articles in the field. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stevens, one of my favorite justices ever, by the way, cited and quoted from one of Professor Sachs' articles and his dissenting opinion in Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Prior to joining the RWU Law School faculty, Professor Sack served as Deputy Director of the Center for Court Innovation, where she helped develop and implement the first domestic violence courts in New York. She has also worked intensively with several jurisdictions in assessing and improving their response to domestic violence, including Louisville, Kentucky, Anchorage, Alaska, Portland, Maine, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Professor Sack previously practiced in the areas of criminal defense and family law in New York City. She's a graduate of Swarthmore College and New York University School of Law. I'm also delighted to welcome Rochelle Garza, Esquire, to RWU Law for our 6th Annual Women in Law Leadership Lecture. Rochelle Garza is an attorney from the Rio Grande Valley, currently serving as president of the Texas Civil Rights Project, one of the most influential legal organizations dedicated to empowering Texas communities in creating policy changes in that state. Rochelle has the honor to be appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights by President Biden, where she will serve as chair until 2028. The USCCR is the oldest independent and bipartisan commission in the United States, created by the Civil Rights Act of 1957. In 2022, Rochelle became the Democratic nominee for Texas Attorney General on a platform focused on voting rights, reproductive rights, and government accountability. She was the first Latina to be nominated in Texas history to run for Attorney General by any major party. Rochelle is the daughter of 2 public school teachers. At a young age, she learned firsthand how broken our healthcare system is. Her oldest brother, Robbie, suffered a brain injury during childbirth and grew up with disabilities. Rochelle watched her parents work tirelessly to ensure Robbie had the care he needed. And like so many families, she knows what it's like to make sacrifices for the health of her family. So, Rochelle became a lawyer for the people, fighting for the civil rights of children, immigrants, and families, and has expertise in immigration, family, criminal, and constitutional law. Her work has had broad impacts on civil rights, including the Garza Notice, a federal requirement that ensures teens in immigration detention control their reproductive health care choices, which is still in effect today. Rochelle graduated from the University of Houston Law Center and from Brown University with honors. She lives with her husband, Adam, their 2 young children, and their dog, Ramses, in Brownville, Texas. And we have Attorney Garza joining us remotely today. I am now pleased to turn over the podium for the rest of the program to my colleague, Professor Sack.
Thank you, Dean Bowman. And just give me a second while I bring Rochelle to life. Hold on 1 second. she's chuckling, so I can hear her. So hopefully she's here. Okay, just 1 sec. Yes, here she is. It worked. Hallelujah.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, for joining us. And I know it's difficult circumstances and we wish your family all the best, but we really thank you for your willingness to do this in this format. So I'm just going to get started and first ask about your background. As the dean was pointing out, you were born and raised in the Rio Grande. You are a 5th generation Tejana from this region, and you left the area to attend Brown, but then and get your law degree, and you practiced in the several fields that the dean mentioned. My question is, first, why did you choose to go to law school, and what drew you to this type of work? But also, what drew you to return to Brownsville, Texas, where you had grown up, after you had, left for these other types of endeavors?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you. To be here with all of you virtually. Unfortunately, I had 2 really sick kids and wasn't able to make it out there. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. It's right nestled in the Gulf of Mexico, right attached to Matamoros, Tamaulipas. So I grew up in this very gray space on an international border. You know, I grew up in a family that really valued community, really valued education. My dad was actually one of 13 children. He was born on a farm and had this dream for himself to become a teacher. And he became a teacher. He met my mom, who was also a teacher. And then he wanted to become a lawyer. And then he became a judge. You know, hard work is something that was deeply ingrained in us when I was growing up, but also a sense of advocacy because, as was mentioned earlier, my oldest brother, Robbie, experienced a brain injury during childbirth and grew up with these very profound lifelong disabilities. And I saw my parents advocating for Robbie constantly, whether it was to get him a wheelchair lift so he could go to school, or just basic kindness and treatment whenever he was seeing a physician. I'll never forget my mom telling me one time she came back from taking Robbie to the doctor, and he had had a dislocated hip because this physical therapist didn't believe that he could feel pain. And, you know, the doctor said maybe it's not worth it to spend the money on the surgery he needed. And those were the kind of things that I saw, this dehumanization of this person that I loved so deeply. And I wasn't going to stand for it. My family wasn't they weren't the type of people that were going to stand for that. And it really inspired me to become a lawyer and to use the law as a tool to really advocate for humanity, for people's rights, for the civil rights of everyone. And that has really kind of grounded me. And I came back to the Valley because both my parents are still here. You know, I'm blessed to have them in my life, and family is very important to me. But I also, I deeply love this region where I come from. My family's been here before it was Texas and before it was the United States. So it is my home base, and it will always be my home base.
Well, thank you. And to pick up on what you said about the dehumanization that you felt at an early age with your, you know, how your brother was treated, I thought what was really fascinating about your legal background was that you really handle a very wide range of issues in civil rights, including, you know, attacks on voting rights, reproductive rights, uh, democracy measures, criminal justice issues, etc. And I just wondered how you felt all of these were linked under that umbrella civil rights, and that it's not just, you know, silos of these various issues.
I mean, I think there's a few things that you learn when you go to law school, and it's stare decisis, right? There's this concept that you kind of follow what was done before, but also you realize that the law builds on itself, and understanding, just stepping back and seeing kind of the chipping away at different civil rights. If you're talking about voting rights and undermining of the Voting Rights Act, if you're looking at what's happening with immigrants' rights is probably more the biggest calling card when you're talking about how all of these pieces fit together. I kind of look at civil rights as a constellation of issues. I look at it as it's really about intersectionality and understanding that when one right falls, the other ones can easily fall as well. And I think the best example of that is what we saw happen with the Dobbs decision and sort of the ongoing threats of seeing, you know, marriage equality being under threat, and different rights that kind of stem from the right to privacy. But I will say the way that I look at this is that it's for those that do not like civil rights or do not like equality. The easiest route to fighting against these things is the lowest hanging fruit, which is the folks that are the most vulnerable. And the folks that are the most vulnerable, in my mind, have often been immigrants. And, you know, I've seen that throughout my legal career. I've seen it, you know, just even stepping back and seeing the landscape of civil rights. But it's that wedge issue, and it will always be that wedge issue for trying to chip away at reproductive rights, freedom of speech, detention rights whenever you're being held in detention. And so I think I look at this in a very comprehensive way,
Mhm.
and I think we're going to continue to see that as an
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, and to follow on that, I wanted to talk about the Jane Doe case that you were involved with. This involved an undocumented 17-year-old girl, Jane Doe, who came to the United States, as an unaccompanied minor fleeing family violence. She was detained in a facility for immigrant children in Texas when she learned she was pregnant. Though she had received approval through a judicial bypass in Texas for an abortion, the first Trump administration tried to block her from receiving the abortion by refusing to transport her from the detention facility for her appointment. And you succeeded in that case. And as the dean was mentioning, now there is something called the Garza rule, which requires that access to reproductive care be provided to teenagers housed in federal immigration detention facilities. Can you tell us a little bit more about the case? I know it was a very prolonged process. I know somehow Justice Kavanaugh was involved when he was on the lower court, and you testified against him at the Senate Judiciary Committee on this issue. So, any of the above, if you want to talk a little bit more, because it seems to be exactly that intersectionality that you were discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a robust experience, I think. For the students in the room, I I was only out of law school, maybe a couple of years. I was still under 5 years, I think, of practicing when that case happened. Um, so Jane Doe, as you mentioned, she was held in a immigration detention center. She was 17 years old, originally from Central America, and she didn't learn that she was pregnant until she arrived at the facility in South Texas, and she decided that she was not ready to become a parent. She asked for for abortion care. She was denied. Initially, she was transported at the very least to her judicial bypass hearing, which was a law under state law that required a teen to petition a state court judge to enact their abortion decision. It's a way of going around parental consent and being able to make a decision for yourself. At least that's how it used to function, before Dobbs fell, or before Dobbs happened. But I was appointed by the state court to represent Jane Doe. I was in private practice at the time. It was a two-person law firm, and I frankly did not think that it was going to become the kind of case that it became. But Jane stood up for herself, and she said that she wanted to enact her decision and that she wasn't going to be stopped from doing so. And she had the entire weight of the federal government against her. The Attorney General, Ken Paxton of the state of Texas at the time, led a coalition of 11 states to try to intervene, get the court to rule that immigrants do not enjoy constitutional protections. So that was happening at the same time, and we went through a lot of hurdles. So we fought in Texas. We had a state court case in Texas, and then we had a federal court case in DC, and partnered with the ACLU on that case. And it ended up weaving its way up to the Supreme Court. But Jane ultimately was able to enact her abortion decision. The Garza notice was a result of that, and it was required to be posted, and it still is required to be posted in all of the facilities that house immigrant children that are controlled by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And then it went into rulemaking last year, and it became, a rule, official rule of how ORR functions. So that case to me, it really indicates what one person can do, especially if they are willing to stand up for themselves and find folks that are going to stand alongside them. And it was a win for Jane, but it was also a win for reproductive rights, and it was also a win for immigrants' rights. And I did testify in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings regarding the case, because I had to personally witness how hard this entire experience was on this young woman who was not allowed to leave the facility, not allowed to dance Zumba. She was not allowed to do anything. She was being followed one on one the entire time by the staff in the facility, and really so much pressure was being put on her, and she just demonstrated an incredible amount of grace. And she was successful, and I'm still in contact with her, and she's doing well.
Great. And just so I'm clear, I believe Justice Kavanaugh, then Judge Kavanaugh, was in the, I don't know if it was the majority, but in the DC Court of Appeals that basically agreed that immigrants did not have rights to access abortion. Am I saying that correctly?
His,
Mhm.
he did not pay attention to precedent. Precedent did not appear in his opinion. Essentially, he was taking the position that Jane could find a sponsor to get her out of detention in order for her to enact her decision, which did not make sense because the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the folks that were detaining her, were the ones that would vet the sponsor and approve of a sponsor.
Mm.
So, I think the law was clear. And, I said as much in my testimony. The law was very clear. He should have followed the law. And instead, gave an opinion that would have prolonged her detention and possibly forced her to have a child against her will.
Yeah. Well, turning to the state of affairs of immigrant rights in Texas, where I know you are on the front lines, I know that recently your organization, the Texas Civil Rights Project, represented Team Brownsville and a nonprofit that provides shelter and humanitarian services to people seeking safety at the border. And in a suit that you were representing them in a suit against the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. My understanding is that Paxton was trying to just depose them because he was claiming that they were helping people cross the border illegally. And it was part of his sort of larger plan to target groups working with people who are providing services to immigrants. And I know you were successful in court in blocking that petition by the AG. And I assume that many of these organizations are facing and will face many more such challenges to provide resources for immigrants. So I think it would be helpful for the audience if you could tell us what it is like on the ground in Texas as regards immigrant rights right now, and any strategy you and these organizations have to address some of these actions by the state and federal government.
Yeah. I think zooming out and thinking about what was happening, especially last year, and why we were seeing these attacks on nonprofit organizations in Texas is really important. So last year we saw investigations of Team Brownsville, of Las Americas, which is another immigrants services organization out of El Paso. We also saw attacks on Jolt, which is another organization that helps with voter registration, specifically with Latino voters. And what was happening, and a few others. There were
Mhm.
a number of other individuals. TCRP, Texas Civil Rights Project, we represent Las Americas and we represent Team Brownsville. But what was really happening was this building of a lie to undermine the election results if they did not go a particular way. The narrative, the groundwork for that narrative was being laid, and it had been laid since the 2020 election, that non-citizens had voted in our elections. And the narrative that our attorney general was trying to build was that there are non-citizens that are being brought in and registered to vote and voting. So that is a blatant lie. It is not something that happens. There are so many safeguards. It is incredibly rare for a non-citizen to cast a vote. That being said, it didn't stop what was happening. But I think that it's really important for us to take a step back and call it for what it is. It is a way of undermining our trust in our democracy. And it lays the groundwork for all these other attacks that we as an organization have been fighting back against. Some of the folks in your audience may be surprised to know that there are citizens that are having challenges getting a passport because their birth certificate is flagged by the federal government because they were born with a midwife. That is happening at the state level as well. TCRP has represented in the past parents who did not have satisfactory identification to get the birth certificates of their US born children so that they can register them for school. And what does that implicate? If you can't register yourself to go to school, you're not going to be able to get your driver's license. You're not going to be able to vote. And all of this is about democracy. All of the work that we do as an organization, whether it's in our criminal legal program, in our voting rights program, in our immigrants' rights, we call it Beyond Borders. So we're doing immigrants' rights and border issues. All of that leads to meaningful participation in democracy. So, that's the kind of work that we've been engaging in. We're a community, we call ourselves community lawyers. So we're deeply embedded in the communities that we serve. And we're going to continue pushing back on what we're seeing and making sure that we use the law to lay the groundwork to be more protective of civil rights, not just in Texas, but also beyond our state.
Mm. Well, speaking of attorney generals, in 2022, you ran for Texas Attorney General, and as we heard, you won the Democratic primary, which I understand was a pretty tight race. And as the dean told us, you were the first Latina nominee for this position by any major party in Texas history. And though you did not win, you earned the highest percentage of votes than any other statewide Democratic nominee in Texas, which is a feat. So when you decided to run, you were actually pregnant with your now young daughter. And I know just then there had also been some restrictions under Texas reproductive rights law, that one of those trigger laws that would go into effect if Roe was overturned. This was prior to that. And I wondered how the reproductive restrictions, the fact that you were pregnant, sort of factored into your decision to run and your campaign.
Yeah, I was I have two babies now, so I have the name of my youngest is 8 months and my oldest is going to turn 3 this month. But so I was, I believe, 9 weeks pregnant when the 6-week abortion ban in Texas went into effect. It was SB 8. I know a lot of folks heard about it in the news because it included this sort of bounty hunter scheme that was using civil law in a really novel way to evade judicial review. So it was a really scary time for me personally, but I was also very angry about the state of the world, and I was really upset about that was my first pregnancy. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, and I know that there are a lot of challenges, right, to access to healthcare. Having grown up in the border region, healthcare is something that is very lacking. We don't have a lot of resources, and knowing that, it really motivated me to run. And especially against someone who I personally had dealt with in the reproductive justice work I've done in the past. But it was about fighting back, and it was fighting back what I knew what was wrong. I knew that there were going to be people that would die as a result of the ban that we had in Texas, and that has been proven to be true. And unfortunately, we're seeing lots of articles about these women who have left behind husbands and really young babies, young children, because they weren't treated for miscarriage because of the abortion ban, the 6-week abortion ban, and then later when Dobbs fell. I felt like it was important for me to run because these decisions that I was seeing externally are all being made by people that don't know what it's like to be a parent, don't know what it's like to be pregnant, and it was important to step up and to run on a platform of reproductive freedom, but also on a platform of civil rights. And I will say, for everyone, so I was very pregnant when we went into the primary. It was a 5-way primary. I got 40%, 40 something percent of the vote in the 5-way primary, but not enough to get over that 50% threshold. And so I had my oldest Ceci right after a couple weeks after that primary, and so she turned 2 months old when I won the primary runoff. So it was an experience of becoming a mother for the first time, and also being a first time candidate and running for office. It was quite a bit, but I have a wonderful family, so I've got a lot of support.
Wow. So after that race, I know that in 2023, you were appointed by President Biden for a 5-year term to be chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and you're actually the youngest person to serve in that position. I wondered because people may not really understand what that commission does, and if you could just spend a few minutes telling us about the importance of the commission, and also this newly appointed regional committee in Rhode Island.
Yeah. So the United States Commission on Civil Rights was created under the Civil Rights Act of 1957. It was initially created to investigate lynchings in the United States and to keep an eye out on civil rights violations in the country. And it has had many different iterations. At one point, the commissioners were Senate approved. At one point, they were all appointed by the president. But the one thing has remained, which is that this is an independent fact finding commission. It is bipartisan. So there are 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. We're split right down the middle. 4 are appointed by the president, 2 are appointed by the majority members of the House and Senate, and 2 are appointed by the minority of the House and Senate. So it is, it is a fact-finding independent agency that is tasked with looking at issues and informing Congress and the president about different things that we've seen. And the commission itself has done a lot of investigations. One comes to mind on maternal health that has helped informed legislation that has been crafted, like the Momnibus that Congresswoman Underwood has put together. We did a broken promises report on Native Americans and including voting rights as well. That informed some legislation that was introduced by Senator Warren and Congresswoman Deb Haaland at the time. She was the Interior Secretary more recently. But the commission has done, since I've been there, since my tenure, we've looked at facial recognition technology and if there are any safeguards that the federal government has implemented in its usage. We found out that there are little to none in terms of how the Department of Justice and DHS and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the safeguards are not necessarily there. So we have made recommendations and are really reaching out to members of Congress to ensure that we can have some safeguards around this technology and the way it's being used. So there's a number of things. We're also currently investigating teacher shortages and the impact on students with disabilities nationwide. And my project that I've put forward is investigating juvenile mental health in prisons in the United States. So, and that was informed by the Texas Advisory Committee. So we also have advisory committees in every single state, as well as the territories like the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and each advisory committee, it's volunteer. It's also bipartisan. They investigate issues. They uplift it to the National Commission, and we advocate on behalf. Sometimes those the state advisory committees, their recommendations will inform state legislation, which is really critical and really important. So Very recently, we appointed the Rhode Island State Advisory Committee that is now up and functioning, and the chair of that committee is, I believe, a Brown professor. So we're very excited about the work that they will produce.
Great, thank you. Um, Sort of shifting to talking about your your personality traits. Throughout your career, you've really demonstrated, as all this discussion has indicated, real perseverance and leadership skills and a capacity to fight powerful people and institutions. And many people, and I would say women in particular, are very anxious or fearful about taking on leadership roles, and often have imposter syndrome where they believe they are not competent or qualified enough. And that is also added to by the fact that often people are underestimated in these positions. And I know you've said you've been underestimated in some of these, like when you took on the AG race. So I wondered what was in your background to make you feel comfortable taking on these kinds of roles, and just advice you would have, particularly for our students, about not holding yourself back from applying for these types of positions.
I mean, there's so much to say about this topic. I think on a personal level, I I I think a lot about my grandmother. My grandmother's the one I think about the most when I'm in a lot of spaces. You know, she was a immigrant from Mexico. She got married as a teenager, and she gave birth to 13 kids, mostly in my great grandmother's home here in Brownsville. And I remember when I became a teenager, she told me, she's like, don't get married. And if anyone has a Mexican grandma in this room, it's a shocking thing to hear. So I I and I think a lot about her, and I realized what she was really trying to say to me was like, make your own life, choose your own choose your own choices, right? Like you get to lead. And I think a lot about her because I realize when I feel like I'm in a space where where I may feel imposter syndrome, or I may feel from the room that they don't believe I belong there. I think about her, and I think about me being the continuation of her life's legacy and of her dream. Um, and so I I would share that with your audience. I would share that with each of you that are in the room that are in law school. You may be the first, but you won't be the last, and you should never be the last. And I think that it's our job to make room for other people that have our experiences, because if we don't, the world will not contemplate us when it continues to be built. Um, so
That's great. Thank you. Speaking specifically about public interest work, because I know, and I've told you that many of our students are interested in going into that field. What advice do you have for how to sort of break into that world? And coming right out of law school, what would your advice be?
So my biggest advice is make sure there's two things. One, take negotiation if it's offered to you. I think negotiation skills are so critical to anything you will do. Um, it's foundational. The second thing I will say is do not be afraid to do direct representation, meaning do not be afraid to take a family law case or to work in like a small firm, or work in public interest. Working at, we have a legal aid organization here in Texas called Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and most of the times they're living in these really rural communities, uh, very small counties. And I would encourage students to take those opportunities, because if you take them, you'll learn how to directly advocate, but you'll also start to see patterns to the issues that are happening. I represented, folks on a criminal wheel down in my county. We didn't have a public defender, so the private bar would take cases, and I started to identify patterns and issues. And I think that will inform that has informed me how to be a better lawyer and how to do impact litigation. So, take my advice to heart and do not be afraid of doing direct representation.
Thank you. That's great. Well, I know we're running short of time before. I know there are people from the audience who want to ask questions. I have one final question for you, which is something we ask all of our Will speakers, which is, what is the one hope that you have for the next generation of women attorneys?
That's one. I think, I always be yourself and know that you deserve to be in the room. I think my hope is that we continue to persevere even through the challenges that we're seeing, especially these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's really a veiled attack on civil rights, but it is an attack on us belonging in a room. And I want us to take our space as women, as leaders, as people that believe in what's right, and that's going to be my hope for this next generation of lawyers. Is you have all the power in you. You know, get out there and don't let anybody tell you don't deserve to be where you are. And make sure you have your community around you. Don't surround yourself by people that aren't going to be supportive of you. You need people to gas you up.
Yeah.
And believe in you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to hang out for about 15-20 minutes. We have time for questions from the audience. So I think if anyone's interested in asking a question, if you could please come to the mic, because that's the way that Rochelle can hear you. That would be great. So is approaching. Rochelle can't see the.
No problem.
If you can't hear Rochelle, just let me know and I can repeat it. Okay.
Hi, Rochelle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. My question is, how do you balance the emotional and intellectual challenges of working in civil rights law?
That's a great question. I don't know, frankly, if I have a good answer for that. I think that I think the way that you have to find your joy somewhere, right? I mean, I think that, so I started my career doing direct representation of children that were seeking asylum, and I would take that work home with me, and knowing, if I lose this case, this kid may be killed in their home country, and that's like a very heavy thing to go home with at night. And I think that the way that I got through that work is knowing that I could control what I could control. That may sound silly, but you can only do what you can do, and you have to leave it there and go home and find what fuels you and makes you joyful and happy. And for me, these days, it's my kids, it's my husband, it's being able to go to the zoo together and watch my nephew and my daughter play together. It's taking time for myself to go get a massage. It's these different little things that we do to find strength in something else, but also just knowing that you are doing everything you possibly can do.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Yes, Professor Gonzalez, who runs our immigration clinic, is about to ask you a question. Just identifying. That was a student before. Right.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Ms. Garza, for being here. I'm the director of the immigration clinic here, and of course, we're in New England, and we're not at the southern border, and we all know of all the executive orders that have gone in place against the immigrant community. And I'm curious to hear from you what the sentiment in the Rio Grande area is. I had been there, I think, in 2020 when the pandemic was just beginning under the Trump administration, when tent courts were up, and I was there with students, and there was the tent city on the Matamoros side, and there was the tent courts on the Brownsville side. And even then, I think the sentiment was really heavy in terms of how immigrants were viewed, even in that area. And I'd be curious to hear from you now what the sentiment is, and have you seen any civil rights violations relating to the military that is at the border now, preventing people from coming in? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, I think the sentiment is still it's very heavy for folks just to kind of lay this out. There is a checkpoint. There's a border checkpoint that's 60 miles inland. And so I'm in Brownsville, but if I want to leave Brownsville and drive up to Austin or San Antonio or Houston, I have to go through another checkpoint where I have to say that I'm a citizen. Same thing if I get on a plane.
Wow.
Anyone who is leaving from the region has to have another check, and that has created a lot of mixed status families living in the region. So there is a lot of fear. It's not just the new arrivals that our community was welcoming with dignity. We had a whole program at the city level in Brownsville and McAllen and all of these partner organizations that were welcoming these families and helping them with food and a shower and a backpack and some clothes and helping arrange their travel, things like that. That's not happening anymore. And, you know, we're we're aware that there are quotas. And so we are seeing families being separated, families that have been living in the region for 20, 30 years, where the parents are being arrested and deported. My organization is representing, a few folks that have experienced this, that have been deported with their children, their U.S. citizen children, where the parent is not a non-citizen. And so I think there is a real fear. And I think, given the election results, because a lot of these regions went for Trump, but I think that they did not believe that they did not believe that this is how this was going to play out. Mm-hmm. And so it is a really concerning experience. And with regards to the military, I mean, we've had our governor has had the military deployed all along the border for a while. I know now we're seeing additional military. I've seen helicopters over my home, military helicopters, those massive ones. And we have yet to see violations, but we know that it is something that is coming, and we've just got to be vigilant and ensure that that we're working with the community and ensuring that people's rights are respected.
Thank you. We have someone else approaching.
Hi, my name is Maddie Wolf. I'm a first-year law student here at Roger Williams. I know that it's a really scary political time to be a first-year law student. A lot of us are hearing from our professors that we don't really know what's going to happen by the time we graduate. I was wondering if you could offer any advice on how you keep advocating and fighting and staying motivated when it feels like an uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what you're feeling and what a lot of the students are feeling. I mean, look, as lawyers, we all learn the same thing. We learn about the rule of law. We learn about separation of powers. We learn about just how our system is meant to function. Marbury versus Madison is probably one of the first cases you've read, and it's come up recently, right? It is a really scary time, and I would encourage you. I would encourage you to just wake up every day and keep doing it, right? I think that I don't have a real answer other than to tell you what I'm doing, which is I wake up in the morning and I know what I have to do during the day, and that is, you know, that is get through my meetings, make sure that the organization is running, make sure that we're representing people, make sure that that we're advocating at the Texas legislature, because that's what we're doing, and trying to stop bills that are more harmful for students. But I would encourage you to make phone calls if you have spare time, but focus on studying, focus on getting through law school, becoming a lawyer, because this is a tradition, the legal tradition. It's within us as lawyers, and it will only continue if we believe in it and if we continue to practice it. So try not to feel despair. I know it's hard, but we've got to just keep going.
Thank you so much.
I think we might have just a minute for a final question, if anyone has one. Yes.
Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm a faculty administrative assistant here at Roger Williams, but I'm also a campaign manager for state representative campaigns and just recently a Providence School Board position. So this question is more leaning towards policies and legislations and for law students who are interested in drafting laws and policies. The intersection of immigration law and family law can be especially complicated for families with mixed immigration statuses. How does the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights assess the impact of immigration policies on family unity? And what recommendations have been made to protect these families across regions?
Thank you for your question. So this predates my time at the commission, but the commission did do an investigation on family separation, and that report can be found online. It was a really robust investigation and look into what happened specifically with family separation, but I do believe that that's something that can be expanded. I think that our state advisory committees are really critical at this point in time and have the opportunity to take up these issues on the local level, on the state level, and to investigate what is happening on the state level. And then turning around and giving us some recommendations, right? So the commission itself, we're not an enforcement agency, we're an investigatory body, but there is so much value. And I think this kind of goes to the climate that we're in right now. There is so much value in an independent agency like the Commission on Civil Rights for just documenting what's happening and making recommendations. Because I've said this very often, and I know everyone has probably heard some iteration of this, but history is told from the eyes of the winner. And we need to make sure that we preserve information, we preserve what is happening to the best of our ability, no matter what happens over the next few years in terms of of what's happening with the federal government.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. This has been incredibly inspiring, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Rochelle, I'm going to minimize you on the screen, not in real life, and Jody Haley's going to come on and move on to our next portion of the program. Thank you. I'm just trying to figure this out. Okay. Sorry, technical. Oh, that's it. I got it. Hey, I did it. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Sack and Attorney Garza, for joining us tonight. That was really important and a wonderful dialogue. And so I truly appreciate the discussion. I would now like to introduce the president of the Women's Law Society here at Roger Williams University School of Law, Megan Graham, who will announce the winners of our RBG essay and artwork contest. Megan Graham is the president of the Women's Law Society for this school year. She's a 3L from Wilkes-Barre. Did I pronounce that correctly? Pennsylvania. She's a wellness fellow with the Academic Excellence Program and co-editor of the law school's Wellness Connection newsletter. Megan is a student leader with the Feinstein Center's Pro Bono Collaborative Eviction Help Desk project in Providence and a student assistant at the Law Library. Additionally, she's a student executive board member of the Rhode Island Women's Bar Association and the wellness coordinator for the School of Law's Mental Health Club. Megan was a Rule 9 student attorney who interned in the housing department at Rhode Island Legal Services during her 2L spring, assisting attorneys and helping clients facing eviction proceedings. During both summers between her first and second years of law school, Megan interned at Diller and Solomon in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, working on criminal and civil rights cases. She was a Pennsylvania Rule 321 certified legal intern with the firm last year, second chair in many criminal proceedings. Megan is currently a Rule 9 student attorney participating in the Criminal Defense Clinic, and upon graduation and passing the bar exam, Megan looks forward to returning to Pennsylvania and joining Diller and Solomon as an associate attorney. Thanks for coming up, babe.
I'm small. Good evening, and thank you for your kind remarks, Jody. Each year, our School of Law invites students across Rhode Island in grades ranging from K through 12 to submit original artwork or essays on how they've been inspired by the late, great United States Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Women's Law Society has picked one winner in each of our 3 categories, and I am honored to share them with you tonight. We will start off with our high school winner, Hazel Bradley. Hazel is in 10th grade at Mount Hope High School and submitted her essay titled, "Everyone Can Learn from Ruth Bader Ginsburg." Hazel, would you like to come up to the podium and read your essay?
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Throughout my childhood, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was just a name I heard from adults every once in a while. And I thought to myself, what a long and confusing name to have. How does anyone remember what to call her? Now, I own a pair of socks with RBG's face all over them, and I have a picture on my fridge as me dressed as RBG for Halloween in 8th grade. Well, I was actually a Ruth Bader Ginsburg fairy because all of my friends were dressed as fairies and I wanted to be included, so I tacked some fairy wings onto my Supreme Court Justice robe. Ever since I learned of Ginsburg's quote, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made," a spark was lit inside of me, and I suddenly had a passion for feminism and living my life the way that Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want me to as a member of the next generation of powerful women in America. Every day, I try to prove to myself and others that I and other young women have the capability to be leaders like RBG. In a world where the media is everywhere we look, spreading heartbreaking stories and news of how our country is failing at things that it's always been important not to fail at, it's hard to stay optimistic and remember that it is all just a low-light reel. RBG once said, "The true symbol of the United States is not the bald eagle, it is the pendulum, and when the pendulum swings too far in one direction, it will go back." So I try to remember that while there are bad things happening, there are also a lot of bright people ready to take action and turn things around for the better. Specifically, young women like me, full of opinions and finding places to express those opinions to make positive change. Our generation is not doomed, as some say, it's just getting started, and soon the world will see how much we are capable of. If RBG believed in us, then I think we should too. So, in the cracks of all the bad things happening, flowers are poking through more and more each day. And who is planting the seeds for those flowers and tending to them? Strong women. And when Ruth Bader Ginsburg first started making change, growing flowers, there were a lot less women doing it with her. However, Ginsburg and other female leaders have paved the way for girls like me to live in a world where we can all grow flowers and support each other despite some trying to stomp on the petals. RBG also inspires me to be a peaceful activist. As she once said, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. This strategy of achieving positive change is what I think everyone should be keeping in mind going through. When being an activist for a cause you care about, you can't shut down the opposing side. You must show people who don't agree with you why you think the way you do, and in a peaceful light that won't make them resent you and whatever you stand with. The only way to rise together is to respect each other enough not to label one another as good and bad. Ruth Bader Ginsburg brought respect with her everywhere she went, and she showed our beautiful country what success can come from lifting each other up instead of putting each other down, collaborating instead of fighting, respecting instead of insulting, understanding instead of judging, listening instead of dismissing, sharing instead of forcing, compromising instead of polarizing, peacefully helping our country grow as one, not divided. And so, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has inspired me, along with everyone else touched by her wisdom, strength, and compassion, to bring my young, female, and innovative mind to the table where decisions are being made to make our community, country, and planet a better place for everyone.
Sorry.
Crush it.
Thank you, Hazel. Congratulations. Next, our middle school winner is Catherine Harley. Catherine is a 7th grade student at Broad Rock Middle School and submitted her essay titled How Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Inspired Me. Catherine, would you like to come up to the podium and read your essay?
All my life I've heard the Honorable Judge's name, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. My mom is a lawyer, so it was a frequent topic at the dinner table. I listened in awe over bowls of pasta at my mother's stories of the justice's life. How in college she went to all of her husband's classes, including her own, and took notes for him while he was sick. How even through the harsh sexism of society, she just kept going. As a young child, and even now as a slightly older child, I have always taken inspiration from the miraculous justice. These stories inspired me to learn about the law and the history of the law. I decided to attempt to read the Constitution. I was inspired to dive into my love of history. I asked my mom an uncountable amount of questions about the law. I took economics books out of the library to learn more about how the law of economics works and how the law controls the economy. I was inspired to fight against sexism and anyone who opposes me, to live up to her example. After Justice Ginsburg's death on September 18, 2020, during the pandemic, I felt a new fuel to invest myself even more in learning. But also, I was inspired by how hard Justice Ginsburg worked all her life. Even after she became a member of the Supreme Court, she worked for what she thought was right, no matter the setbacks and obstacles along the way. We should all follow in her footsteps and carry on the amazing legacy that she left behind. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an inspiration to me and should be an inspiration for everyone. In conclusion, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has inspired me and the entire world with her bravery and perseverance. Although she's not with us anymore, she will always be remembered for her accomplishments to make the world a better place. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an inspiration on people who will take over roles as types of leaders, including me taking on the role as a community leader. To me, she is a symbol of hope and perseverance, and just inspires me to keep pushing on.
Thank you, Catherine. Congratulations. Last but not least, our elementary school winner is Wren Anderson. Wren is in 4th grade at Richmond Elementary School. She submitted original artwork titled How Has Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Inspired Me? Wren, if you would like to come up, we would love to show everybody your drawing. Thank you, Wren. Congratulations. Thank you all for your submissions to our RBG essay and art contest. We love looking at these submissions each and every year. I would like to thank the members of the Women's Law Society Executive Board for all of their hard work and for choosing our winners this year. I would also like to thank the entire Will Planning Committee for their hard work and dedication in making this event possible. And of course, to Ms. Garza, thank you for being able to still hold this discussion on Zoom. At this time, I'd like to hand the program back over to Jody so that she could close out our evening.
Okay. Congratulations to our winners. Thank you so much for all the students who participated. I just have a few acknowledgements, the hard work of a number of people who make this event possible. Specifically, a special thanks to Chelsea Horn and Elizabeth Baza from our Programs and Initiatives Office. hard work you put into these events to make them possible. The members of the WIL Steering Committee, who are a pleasure to work with as always as we plan these each year, and of course our generous sponsors. We have a reception immediately following, just right out here on the second floor atrium. So please join us for some food and some drinks. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a good night.